Hi, my name's Benedict. I was actually planning to make this in part 2, but then I realised it's just getting too big and too complex, and I wanted to separate this out. This video may not be necessary for you, but remember, what I'm doing is I'm trying to boil down really basic theory and ways to make it work for you. So if you are watching this series, then there's a fair chance that you may not have fully understood what I did last time. So by taking the basic chord progression and then using the notes within that chord progression to make a melody, that may be something that you understood easily, but if you did, then you're probably not struggling so much. But if that made little sense to you, it's like, Benedict, how did you do that? You did it and it happened and don't get it. Then I'm actually going to walk you through showing you doing this. Now, I'll warn you at the beginning, we're probably not going to end up with a great melody, but what you will see is it actually happening, so you can get a sense of, oh, if I did the same thing, then I can start to get the results. Now, I'm going to say to you, as much as possible, practice, practice, practice. Obviously, as we've discussed, you've decided for whatever reason that you're not going to go practicing A minor, B sharp, and all of those myriads of chord and scale options over and over again. It's not happened, or it's not going to happen, and that's fine, but we're going to assume that you're comfortable with your scale, your root note, your leading into root note, your fifth, your third, and how to make a triad. So it's a major triad. That's the basis of all chords. 1, 3, 5. You can go to a 7th chord, which is just one more on top. But remember, each step in a chord is by having one empty white note between. So C and E are my chord. B in the middle, we're not touching him. Another empty, which is your F. There are chord notes. So, I've made a chord progression. That's Europa there sitting in the background. That's all he's going to do. He's just going to play that, nothing else. And we've got a piano. What better to make melodies with than a piano? You can use whatever you want, absolutely whatever you want, but I'm just going to use a piano here because the piano is nice and clear, and you can do almost anything with the piano. Things will sound great with the piano, almost regardless of what you do. So, we need to build our chord progression. And I'll just step back because you may not have realized what I was doing. Our chord progression here and our bass is just going to play the root. So we've got a bar each of C, E, G, which is actually there, but we don't want to climb because it's just going to sound goofy. So we've pulled it down an octave. Because if your chord progressions wander off, no one can hit that note. Even Roy Orbison could not hit those notes. So it's far better than doing, because that just sounds wrong. Allows it to cycle. So we want to keep things as close to home. Now again, home is the root note of the chord. We're working in C major. Remember watching the other videos, there's a trick to move that so that we can transpose and lock to a key. Go watch the other videos for those. But we're working in C major, so the root is C. So we want to keep things around C, not wandering off somewhere else. Yes, there are octaves and what have you, but it gets hard. Like I say, you then got a situation where you're asking somebody to sing way outside of not only their natural range, but their human voice. Weird. Not cool. Unless you really know what you're doing. Weird and not cool. So, our basic chord progression. And you go, yeah, but they're not chords, they're single notes. That's all right. Our bass here is our bass, and we're just going to have it pick out those. So our melodic instrument, the simplest way to build this up is to copy that, because we know they're the right ones, but we don't want them there, we want them here, because if you play everything in the bass, not only are they going to conflict, but you're going to muddy up your mix. Do not play everything in the bass. I know on their own, bass sounds sound great, and they seem to get thinner as you go up. Not so much on a piano, but on a synthesizer or on any instrument, it seems to get thinner as you go up, nature of the ear. But if you make everything happen down here, workable in a piano, oddly enough. But try that with a synthesizer and see how far you get. Actually, let's do exactly that, just to prove the point. Ugh. By separating those lines out, they now make sense. So we'll move where we're composing. Just expand that a little bit. There we go, a bit more space so you can see. So we've got our bass line for the bass and our melodic line for the moment playing around middle C. We can move it up, we can do anything with it, we'll see how we go. Now the first thing we want to do is, this is a chord progression, we need to make chords. See what I've done there? I've copied that. So I've dragged it from C to E. Don't worry about the later notes, we'll deal with them in a moment. And we've grabbed that to G. So now we've got chords. Chord, 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 chord. We do want to check these though and make sure that they're actually valid chords. Now speaking of, I might just change this colouring to one that's just a wee bit easier to work with. There we go, a bit easier to see the difference between light and darks. So 1, 3, 5, all good. 1, oh, not good. That does not belong in C major. So we're going to move that. Now the easy way to know is, remember, note, white note in the middle. So we can see a white note here that doesn't have a bar on it. And that one there. White note that doesn't have a bar on it. That one there. So there shouldn't be any sharps. See? So we had 2 white notes exposed here. Ooh, not cool. Tells us we're wrong. No sharps, we know we're good. So that would actually have been A major, but it's given us a sharp which doesn't belong in C major. So we drag that back to where it belongs. 1 empty white note, 1 empty white note. The fact that that's actually going to be called something like A minor, please ignore. It is correct, but that's where music theory gets horrifically complicated and where you get really, really lost with it, because you sort of go, but I'm playing an A chord and I'm in C and it's saying A minor, and it's like, ignore it for now. It does do your head in. It's correct, but it's more information than you can do anything with. So for the moment, just call it an A chord. So we've got a C chord, an E chord, a G chord, and an A chord, which is C, E, G, A. I know I'm labouring the point, but I'm trying to help you to make this easy. So that's set up our basic chord notes. we're going to do here, we'll make those notes shorter. Once you get to the point of being able to remember and just automatically play in those notes, just to sort of say, oh, I'll put a note there because I know it's my E, great, no worries. But in the meantime, this will make it easy because you've now actually got markers that show you where you can put notes, and we can drag them out. So let's drag these out. Tip. Not always a good plan to have two MIDI notes butt up to one another, because if something happens with your timing, especially if you're using grooves that create humanization or slop in your timing, it's possible that in reality what the sequencer is seeing is one note on top of the other, in which case it won't play the second note. So it often is better just to shorten that by a little bit, just because if we ask it to play that note next, then it might not play and then you'll be confused. Not the world's greatest melody, but see how we've now started to... Essentially that's an arpeggio, but it's a good start. It's actually working on something that allows us to move. Aha! We've created sameness. Sameness is great. There's a fair gap, however, now between this and this. There always was a fair gap between these two, so we've got to work out how to bridge that gap. A melody that just goes is complex. That's fine if they're parts of two phrases, but where there's a big gap, you've got to be careful. You can use those big gaps. Again, on a piano, very, very forgiving, especially if you've got your sustain pedal on, but we don't necessarily want to leap that big gap. Let's give it a go and see what happens. See, it's getting boring. So we might want to try this. And straight away the brain's going, okay, that's where we're going to go with this. All we've done is really just created arpeggios, but we've now got something resembling melodic movement. All we've done is use chord notes. If we want that to flow a little bit better, we could carry that. And let's look at carrying this. We'll just make that a wee bit shorter so make sure they play. Technically that's a melody. It's not a great melody. Not a great melody at all. But see how we started with virtually nothing, and now we're starting to have things flow. And flow is what's important. Let's try this. Now notice that I keep saying let's try. It's very easy at this point to look at a blank page and go, what am I going to do? And then go, what am I going to do? And then go, what am I going to do? Next thing you know, you're playing video games. You might be able to say to yourself, oh yes, at the end of the day I killed 27 monsters. But what did you build? Nothing. Nothing against video games, they're fun. I love to kill monsters. But I love to make music. I love to build something far more. I'd rather get to the end of the day and say I made half a piece, or even 2 bars of music, than to say I killed 48 monsters. So, do exactly what I'm doing here, and throw notes at the page. It's better to throw notes at the page and go, okay, than to have nothing. Because as long as you've got nothing, oddly enough, you'll have nothing. Nothing breeds nothing. Multiply anything by 0, and what do you get? 0 every time. I'm going to multiply my $1 million by a 0. You're no longer a millionaire. You frittered away your money. I'm going to multiply $1 million by 1. How much money have you got? $1 million. Obviously, leveraging is where you multiply your $1 million by 2, and you've got $2 million. Let's say we start with $1 million worth of talent. Sadly, most of us don't realize all our talent. It's just the way we go. But if you're killing monsters, then you're multiplying by 0. But if you're throwing notes at a page and going, okay, some of that sounds good, some of that doesn't sound good, then at least we can try adjusting things. Because we're better to work on adjusting what we've got than to work with nothing. Okay, we've now sort of got something. This first half. It's the second half we need to work on. Okay, we got something. Let's try that. It may be a little too sudden, but can you hear how with just a little bit of work we stumbled around, but suddenly we're starting to have something work. That's a singable melody. Straight away I'm hearing it, I'm going ba 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 ba. Probably sung it all wrong, but it's memorable straight away. Winning. Now I know some of you are going to want to say to me, oh, but Benedict, that's cheesy. Get over yourself. It's really what I'm going to say back to you. Get over yourself. Are you here to write music, or are you here to flatter yourself? The two are not always the same. If you go and please read the artist development course that I put online, it is reading. It's not watching like this one, it's reading. But read that. One of those articles there is about surrendering your ego to the song. What's more important? To be able to say, I made something really cool that nobody wants to hear, therefore it's not cool, or to say, look, I surrendered a little bit of what I thought and turned out something that was really good. And I know fashion has had this habit in the last little while, a horrible habit, of saying anything that was melodic or bombastic was cheesy and uncool. Screw that. Really, screw that. Because it's counterproductive. That's why music these days tends to suck big time. Because we've taken out everything that actually makes music magnificent. It's those moments where humans sort of stand up and go. But these days we're all so busy being po-faced and growing our bushy beards that we're not prepared to do that. When Bon Jovi stood up in 87 or whatever it was and released Slippery When Wet, you might laugh and go, oh, but it's so cheesy, man. It's like, fuck you. Those guys are multi-millionaires because of that record. You've got a bushy beard. They're multi-millionaires. They got a record that people are still buying right now. They're still increasing their multi-millionaireness without having to do a single extra thing. You grew a beard and maybe killed some monsters. They're multi-millionaires and still making money off it. Who's an idiot now? So, melody is the core of everything. Let's take another example. Let's take an example that you probably still want to rank as cool. I'm assuming you're in EDM. Let's take Darude's Sandstorm. That track is cool. There is a reason why it still ranks in the lists of cool EDM tracks. And one of the reasons is that it broke through. And the reason that it broke through was not because of the was because it actually just had enough melody to work. It was melodic and it was bombastic. So there's two things that everyone wants to part the soup in their beard and say are uncool, are the very reasons that broke through and was suddenly being listened to by a lot of people who to that point didn't listen to EDM. That converted a lot of people to EDM fans. So that serves your purpose. But the reason that worked, not as well as Slippery When Wet, but I shouldn't say that. The reason that track worked and still has credibility is actually because it broke the supposed rules that everyone had created at that time to say no melody, no bombast. It contained both melody and bombast, and that's why it worked. Read reviews of the rest of the record, and you go, yeah, nobody bought that record, and it's why? Because they didn't actually manage to make their melodies or anything work. The rest of the record sounded like poor attempts to recreate Sandstorm. So, I'm not just being boring. I'm saying, hey, this is a tip. You all want a hot tip. The tip is get a basic sense of how to make melody. You're listening to this going, oh, it's with a piano, and oh, it's so cheesy. I mean, that's just not cool. Get the fuck over yourself. You could remove Mr. Radical Piano and put in a super saw, and you'd start to feel differently. You might want to put in some kind of a device between your super saw and the mixing desk. But what's going to make that work is not the bit, it's actually this bit. Let's copy our thing across there. what we need to do is to look at variation here. There's only so many times that we want to do the same thing here, because we start to get in trouble. Now, straight away, I know where I want to go. And half of melody creation is knowing where you want to go. I was taught this by my theory teacher. And initially I was like, but then I realized he was really, really right. As before where I talked about, well, we've got a big gap between here and there. See how I've now smoothed that gap out? I knew where I wanted to go. So in a sense here, we start on our root note over there, and we need to finish on our root note there. Our first go round, we've actually finished up, and that's okay, because if we finished here and went straight to the same note, it's not going to have the same impact. So I was able to say, okay, let's take a good punt on finishing on our root note, and to make that sound like it finishes nicely, let's go with the subdominant leading note. Let's see what happens. Sounds a bit funny. So let's mark where we are and go into the bass. First thing we want to do here is change this. So now, you see I've pulled this to our root note and I've moved that to there. Actually, I got that wrong. Forgive me. I got that wrong. That's where our move is, so I better go back. See, we all make mistakes. I'll put that back where it was. Put that there. Control Z, get my note back. Put that there. Okay, that has fixed this bit. That now works. But I don't particularly love that this plays again. So we need some variation. That's an E note, so E, G, B. Let's see what happens if we go here. No, don't love it there. I do like that. That's not actually a chord note, because our chord is here. But because our root is playing the bass down here, it's really playing that. It's acceptable. If we play, it's not nice. Interesting, but acceptable. So you can use your octaves to separate out what's otherwise unacceptable. Because at this point, we're hearing the same bass line, the same chord progression. Our brain's now going, okay, I'm more interested in the melody because it's the one that's doing something different. The chord progressions now become kind of like the fridge in the background. we're half ignoring it. This one now stands out a little bit. That's great. Is it the same as a Beach Boys song? No, probably not. But here how we've got a nice, fun melody that we can work with. So that's given us a melody. You may not love that it's in a piano sound. Let's bring it a different sound now. But a bit of an easy way to make a string sound. This wee fella. Always good for a simple string sound. Below Vermont. Pause. Let's start by feeding him the... join them. Now we don't want that down in the bass. We need that to go up a bit. So this is where we need to move things around and stagger them about. So our bass is playing down here. Our piano is playing here. Let's have let's try our string above. You can't say it's wrong. Technically it's right. But is it enjoyable? No. This is where we now start to do what's called countermelody. If you watched the last video, you heard I talk about how you've got the two Indians arguing about whether they go and stick arrows in the cowboys or not. That's building tension as you've got those two melodies working against each other. I resolved that very simply just by choosing one of the melodies and having all the instruments play it. Here we've got this playing the same thing as our chord progression, which is not really very nice. So let's just try and smooth this out by doing nothing more than taking a punt on what those notes are. Now some of the moves that I've made are just based on kind of knowing what these notes are. So it's a little easier for me than it might be for you if you don't know what they are. But nonetheless, I'm just trying it. I'm throwing notes at the page to see what happens. Okay, that's all right. That's more interesting. But it requires this to do something interesting as well. I don't know what it is, but let's try it. Okay, I'll try there. short. Yep, too short. So you see what I did there? This became the same note, and so as a result it lacked movement. I could have merely joined them together. Actually, let's just try that, see what happens. Now that's acceptable. There's nothing wrong with that. If you've got something else more interesting happening somewhere else, then that's actually a perfectly acceptable thing to do, because you've held the note but you've changed the harmony. So in a sense you've got a top note here and a bottom note here. You've held the top note, and your brain tends to pick the top notes because it knows that the top notes are the ones more likely to contain the melodic information, the conversational information. But the harmony underneath still has changed, so there's movement there. But here, because there's not a lot going on top, I just want to re-emphasize that. So it's just re-emphasizing what's going on. I'm just going to try something. All we're doing is adding complexity. Let's actually try another instrument, but we're going to swap things around a wee bit. We'll pull in a Thor. You can do anything with a Thor. It's making a sound on the fly. Get a little bit of chorus. See what we get. Okay, I'm happy with that. Just quick adjustments, I'm happy with that sound. Not loving the piano, but it's gotten us to where we wanted to get to. Now we're going to have a go with these strings again. Now we're looking to achieve a different result. So I'm going back to my basic chord progression. just going to check these notes again, make sure that they are right. Sharp there, bad sharp. Doing that simply because I know what that is. So what I'm looking at here is to add a string pad. So this is where in an orchestra you've got the melodies going along, the bass underneath it, and then you'll have strings that fill out the middle of the piece. So we're starting here with the chord progression. First thing we might want to do is to even some of this out. See how we've got some jumps? We've got some notes that are shared, and that's good. Because with this, it's evenness. We want to make this sound quite even, so that our melody stands out on the top, and our bass is clear on the bottom. So we want to do things that stop it from appearing to leap around. Now we've got more notes that tie and match, so we've minimized the leap here. Hear how that sounds nice and smooth now. That one's a G. I've got to work out where we want to go. This one's pretty high, so I'll look at the ones that really stand out first and pull them into line. That one's a G. There's another G up there. If we were to take, I was just adjusting the sound to give it a little bit of sense of movement. Let's copy that from there to there, but kill it off here. We've now given ourselves the ability to run off another section. This is just our chords. We've tidied them up so that they're smooth. There's more we can do with them, and I'll do it in a moment. But you hear how we can drop out our melodies. And that's pretty. Pop that there. Make sure we're in loop, which we are. Sorry for finger in camera. Here we can start to look at where there are notes that overlap. Let's try this. Hear how that created a little bit of movement. Now before we wanted it to seem the same, but now we want to see if we just create a little bit of movement. Now, here we had an opportunity. Let's look at taking the same opportunity, just to see what happens. But we've got different opportunities here. So let's grab them, make sure we're on the right notes. Okay, we do have a problem now with the end of this. Because it's sort of too fast for these strings to deal with. So we might want to look at seeing if we can modify this. Okay, that's improving it. Let's take these notes that we have here. Oh, I've forgotten we can't join notes. There's absolutely nothing wrong with carrying notes over. I'm particularly trying to keep this. This is kind of important. These are the triad notes. We want to keep those where possible without creating alteration. I don't know what to do with that note, so I'm going to delete him for the moment. I can sort of hear something going up, so I'm going to try. Now here we've ended up with two notes, so we're adding the third. We've got two notes, we're going to add a third. Let's see what happens. Oh, hello. Now the problem I've got with this is that, again, there's just too much movement here. We've got lovely smooth flow here with just little moves that lead us into the next thing. So it flows beautifully, but it doesn't flow beautifully on the end. I got the target of where I want it to be, but it's not going there. Now I think we may have it. It has a moment where it's a little uncomfortable, and no doubt there is a way to fix that. I'm not sure. Let's try this. No, it's actually in this. What if we do this? Okay, that I like. You want to have your tension here so that you can release it here. That I like. Let's try bringing one of our melodies back in. This may not be the world's best piece of music, but I could make something out of this. But notice how I've started. I started with a chord progression. I just made that up. It's just a random chord progression. Whether that's even considered legitimate or correct, or the normal chord progression that someone might use, I don't care. It's there, it works. From that, I created the actual chords, which was adding the triads, but then mostly using chord notes, 1, 2, 3, and then a few passing notes. I was able to extract a melody, create a variation on that. From there, I then created a countermelody. Now you see I changed ideas with this. I started with this as a string line, but then turned it into a synth lead line. And there's no reason why we couldn't do something like this. Doesn't sound quite right there, but that's where we're sharing sounds around. We're sharing our melodic portions around. But with a little bit of time and effort, I could make that actually sound right, so that I can take a little part of a melody that I've written and use it in lots of different places across lots of different instruments. Sometimes by altering it a little bit. Like it doesn't speak as well with that instrument, so I change the way the notes, the timing of the notes. I might sort of go, well look, with the string it speaks better if I put the note there. Great. It's a little variation. And so that creates a cohesion across many parts over a period of time. So again, it doesn't matter whether you're writing like a half-hour symphony or a 3-minute pop song or 2.5 minutes of blamming EDM or whatever. It's by creating that similarity and change, the variations, that you're going to make it through. I hope you found this one helpful. It's just a little part, an abstraction of what I'm doing in the bigger picture. But it's showing you in quite minute detail and showing you what I'm thinking when I'm doing it as well. Thanks very much.